The lights were bright, the music was loud, and the crowd was full of excitement. It was just another night at Jimmy Kimmel Live. The cameras were rolling, the band was playing, and millions of people were watching from their homes. The guest tonight was Johnny Depp, one of the most talked about actors in Hollywood. People expected a few laughs, a few strange outfits, and maybe a wild story or two. Jimmy welcomed Johnny onto the stage with his usual charm. "Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Johnny Depp." The crowd cheered loudly as Johnny walked out, wearing a black jacket, layered scarves, and his signature tinted glasses. He smiled, waved at the audience, and took his seat beside Jimmy Dot. At first, the conversation was light. They joked about Johnny's past roles, his music, and the film he was promoting, a drama about a whistleblower who risks everything to expose a military secret. The crowd listened closely, laughing at Johnny's dry humor and nodding at his serious moments. Everything seemed normal, but then Johnny's tone changed. "You know, Jimmy," he said slowly, "this film isn't just a story, it's real." Jimmy paused. "Well, it's inspired by real events, right?" "No," Johnny replied, removing his glasses. "It is real. Everything in the film happened. And the man behind it, he's not just a character. He was a victim of something dark. Something your government still hides." Jimmy shifted in his seat, glancing off camera. "Johnny, maybe we should stick to the film." But Johnny leaned forward, his voice was steady. "In 2004, in Iraq, there was a secret operation near Fallujah, a black site hidden from the world. Prisoners were taken there, tortured, executed. No trials, no names. One of the people responsible is now sitting in your U.S. Senate." The audience fell silent. Jimmy forced a laugh. "Okay, I think we're getting off track here." But Johnny didn't stop. "His name is Richard Blaine. You know that name, don't you, Jimmy? Senator Blaine. It's a man who says he wants to bring back honor to the military. He signed off on murder." People in the audience began to murmur. Some looked confused, others stunned. The crew behind the cameras started signaling to cut the feed. Jimmy tried to calm the situation. "Johnny, buddy, maybe this isn't the time or place." "Why not?" Johnny snapped. "You have no problem inviting politicians on this show to talk about their books and lies? But when someone tries to tell the truth, it's suddenly off limits." Jimmy turned serious. "I'm not saying that. I just think if you have something to say, there are better ways than hijacking a comedy show. Maybe comedy is the only place where truth still has a chance," Johnny said coldly. Security began moving toward the stage. Jimmy raised his hand, trying to prevent chaos, but Johnny stood up. "Don't touch me," he warned the guards. "I came here to speak, and I'm not done." One guard stepped forward. Johnny reached into his pocket. The audience gasped. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small silver USB stick. He held it up high. "This," he said, "contains files, testimonies, video proof of what Blaine did, of what your government covered up." Jimmy stood now too, trying to maintain control. "We can't verify any of that." Johnny looked at the crowd, at the cameras. "You don't have to believe me. Just look. Don't let them erase the truth again." At that moment, studio security grabbed Johnny by the arms. He didn't fight them, but before they dragged him off stage, he shouted one last thing. "The world deserves the truth." The crowd was in shock. Some people clapped. Others looked unsure. The show cut to a sudden commercial. Social media exploded within seconds. #Depp vs. Kimmel. #Senator Blaine. #the USB within minutes. News outlets picked up the footage. Some said it was a stunt. Others asked, "What's on that USB?" In the control room, a producer whispered to Jimmy, "Do you think it's real?" Jimmy didn't answer. In a dark hallway backstage, Johnny Depp was gone. No one saw him leave. The USB was gone too. Somewhere far from the lights of the studio, someone plugged that USB into a computer. The screen lit up, and the truth began to load. The clip of Johnny Depp shouting, "The world deserves the truth," went viral before the show even ended. Every social media platform exploded with reactions, theories, and outrage. Some said he was having another public breakdown. Others called him brave, finally exposing the lies powerful people had buried for years. But no one could ignore the name he had said so clearly: Senator Richard Blaine. Blaine was one of the most respected political figures in America. A former soldier, now senator, and likely presidential hopeful. He was known for his strong speeches and patriotic image. He often spoke about restoring American honor and protecting our values. He had many supporters and many secrets. The morning after the interview, Blaine held a press conference outside the Capitol building. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Blaine stood tall, his expression calm. "What Johnny Depp said last night was not only false," he said, "but dangerous. These kinds of wild claims damage our country." Served with honor. "I've never been part of anything illegal or unethical. This is nothing more than a desperate attempt by a fading celebrity to stay in the spotlight." But behind the scenes, Blaine was not calm. He sat in a private room with his chief of staff and a man named Michael Vance, senior intelligence officer. "How much does Depp really know?" Blaine asked. Vance replied, "Hard to say. If he got that USB from someone inside the old network, he might have access to archived data, maybe even footage." Blaine clenched his jaw. "It was sealed. All of it." "Sealed, yes," Vance said, "but not destroyed." Meanwhile, in a small apartment in New York City, Alina Nuri, an investigative journalist for Al Jazeera, rewatched the clip on her laptop. She had covered war zones, coups, and revolutions. She recognized the name Operation Torchlight, the rumored U.S. mission in Iraq, where several unmarked deaths occurred and no official record was ever found. As Depp was dragged off the stage, he had dropped something, the USB stick. It wasn't clear where it ended up, but someone in the studio had picked it up. Alina had a lead, a former studio intern. Nervous and unsure, had posted a now-deleted photo on Twitter, a picture of the USB in his hand with the caption, "What did I just say? Pick up." Alina found his contact and reached out. The intern agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Queens. He looked pale and shaken. "I didn't know what it was," he said. "I thought it was a prop, but then I plugged it into my laptop and there were files. Videos, documents, stuff that looked military. There were names, dates, one folder. Said Torchlight Audio Blaine 04. That's when I panicked and unplugged it." "Do you still have it?" Alina asked. He nodded slowly and handed her a small black drive. "Please don't tell anyone it was me." Alina took it and left quickly. She knew what she had was explosive. She went straight to her newsroom and opened the files in a secure offline system. The screen filled with folders, redacted _transcripts, field footage, interrogation _logs, senator _order _4, wave. She clicked the last one. A recording played. Voice 1. "We're holding 4 targets. No IDs. Do we proceed with interrogation?" Voice to clear, deep, confident. "Proceed. No outside records. Full clearance. I'll sign off." Alina froze. The second voice matched Blaine's campaign speeches perfectly. This was more than a conspiracy theory. This was evidence at that moment. Her editor called. "CNN is reporting that the White House has contacted the Kimmel show. They're demanding the full uncut footage." "Something's wrong, Alina," she replied. "No, something's finally right." Back in Los Angeles, Jimmy Kimmel was locked. In a meeting with network lawyers, executives were furious. Sponsors were threatening to pull out. A top producer said, "Why didn't you cut to commercial when he went off script?" Jimmy replied quietly, "Because I didn't know it was a script." Later that night, Jimmy went home and turned on the news. Every channel was playing clips of the interview. One pundit said, "This isn't just celebrity drama. This could be the start of a political earthquake. Jimmy sat in silence. He didn't know it yet, but he had just become part of the biggest story in the world, and far. Away in a dark hotel room, Johnny Depp watched the same reports. He smiled slightly and whispered, "Now they're listening." The files were real. Alina Nuri stared at the screen, heart pounding. The voice recording from the USB was already damning, but the video files were worse. One showed a night vision feed of a makeshift prison, no flags. No uniforms, just masked soldiers dragging terrified men into a steel room. In the corner of the frame was a digital timestamp Fallujah. Iraq, October 2004. The audio feed crackled as someone barked orders in English. No ID, no trial. Clean it up. Alina clicked another file. It was a PDF, a signed memo with the words Operation Torchlight, field clearance approved, and at the bottom, a signature. Our Blaine. This was no longer just a scandal. It was a war crime. Alina knew what this meant. Publishing these files would make her a target, but hiding them would make her part of the lie. She copied everything to an encrypted hard drive and stored the original USB in a secure vault at her news agency. She needed help, someone with reach and someone the public trusted. She called him Jimmy Kimmel. He answered after the third ring. "Alina, why are you calling me?" "Because you're already in it," she said. "And you're the only one with a platform loud enough to fight back." Jimmy sighed. He hadn't been sleeping. Since the DEP interview, his show had been suspended. The network was reviewing the footage. The government had called him twice, and his family had been assigned temporary security. "Alina, I'm not a journalist." "No, but you're a witness, and I have something you need to see." Jimmy met her the next morning at a private location in Santa Monica. Alina showed him the footage, the documents, and the audio of Senator Blaine. As he listened, Jimmy's face turned pale. "Jesus," he whispered. "He gave the order." Alina nodded. "And now he's running for president." Jimmy stood up, pacing. "This isn't just about what Depp said. This is about all of us who played along." We laughed. "We gave them airtime. We never asked questions." Alina handed him a flash drive. "Then maybe it's time you ask one. On air." "But they suspended me." "Then don't wait for permission." Meanwhile, in Washington, Senator Richard Blaine was preparing for a televised town hall event. He looked strong in public, but inside his team, there was chaos. His communications director handed him a folder. "Sir, we have a problem. Al Jazeera might go live with the files." "And Depp is planning something." "Depp," Blaine sneered. "It's just an actor. He has the public's attention. If he reappears and we don't shut this down, we will," Blaine said, cutting him off. "Make the call too. Langley, tell Vance we need action, not advice." Hours later, across the border in Mexico, Johnny Depp was hiding in a safe house. The walls were thin, the electricity was weak. But the laptop on his table had enough battery left for one more recording. He looked into the camera and spoke slowly. "My name is Johnny Depp. I am not a politician. I'm not perfect, but I have seen what they've done. What Senator Blaine did, what the United States government buried. And now I'm ready to show you." He uploaded the video to a secure inside a sleek glass building in Langley, Virginia. Michael Vance stood with his arms crossed, watching multiple screens. The leaked video of Johnny Depp had become the most viewed political broadcast in history. 48 million views and counting. And now the world was asking one question. Who is Richard Blaine, really? Vance didn't blink as the CIA director entered the room. "Is this real?" the director asked quietly. Vance nodded. "It's the footage, the signatures, the files, all real." "Then why wasn't it destroyed?" "'Cause someone years ago kept a copy. And now Johnny Depp has turned himself into a global megaphone." Back in Los Angeles, Jimmy Kimmel prepared for the most important episode of his career. The network had fought him for hours, but when advertisers began threatening, To pull their support over silence, executives gave in. Jimmy sat alone on the empty set of his studio. No cheering crowd, no house band. Just a single camera, a dark background, and a message. Good evening, tonight there's no comedy. No applause, no guests, just truth. He spoke for 7 minutes, laying out what he'd seen, what he'd been told not to share, and why he no longer cared about protecting careers. Then he introduced his guest, Alina Nuri, live from New York. Alina appeared on the screen, calm and focused. Reviewed the files. I've spoken to sources. We have confirmation from whistleblowers who worked inside Operation Torchlight. This was not a rogue mission. It was policy. Blaine signed it. Vance approved it. As she spoke, the network showed censored clips, aerial strikes, internal memos, testimonies from survivors. Jimmy asked why Depp. Because he had something. The rest of us didn't, Elena answered, a voice the world would hear. And the courage to use it when it mattered. Across America, people watched in silence. In Washington, Senator Blaine stared at the TV from his campaign office. His face was stone. His chief of staff entered. We need to respond. Blaine picked up his phone and made a direct call to Vance. Clean it up, he said. Vance replied, it's too late. The fire's already spreading. The next morning, a military drone strike hit a small camp on the outskirts of Mosul, Iraq. The Pentagon said it was targeting insurgents. But local journalists discovered what was left behind: burned tents, broken dishes, and a shattered satellite. Terminal among the ashes was the body of Adel Haddad. He was the last living Iraqi interpreter who had witnessed Operation Torchlight in person. Just last week, he had given a recorded testimony to Elena's team. A copy existed, but his voice was now gone forever. News spread fast. U.S. drone strike kills witness in whistleblower case. Anger exploded across the globe. In Paris, the U.S. Embassy was covered in red paint. In Istanbul, crowds marched. With signs, Blaine equals butcher. In the halls of Congress, pressure mounted. Senator Blaine was called to testify in front of a special Senate committee, but Blaine refused. I will not be part of a witch hunt, he told reporters. This is foreign propaganda meant to weaken America's leadership. But even his allies were turning away. Senator Karen Liu, a respected Republican voice, said live on CNN, if Blaine won't face the truth, then the American people deserve someone who will. Meanwhile, Johnny Depp, still in hiding, released another message. His voice was raspy, but his eyes burned with determination. They're trying to erase people. Real people, witnesses, survivors. If I disappear, if Alina disappears, if anyone disappears, you'll know why. And if you stay silent, it will happen again. Inside the CIA, panic was growing. Vance was summoned for a closed-door meeting with Congress. The president's advisors were split. Some wanted Blaine to resign quietly. Others feared doing so would signal guilt. Alina received a tip from a source deep inside the intelligence community. It was a warning. They're planning to discredit you. Fake reports, old case files. They'll say you've been working with foreign agents. Get out of New York. But Alina didn't run. Instead, she scheduled an interview with the BBC. This wasn't just America's story anymore. On live international television, she laid out the full timeline of Torchlight. She showed documents, timelines, testimonies, and explained how the program was signed, sealed, and used to clean up political enemies in unstable regions, all without oversight. All in secret. The reaction was immediate. The International Criminal Court announced a formal preliminary investigation into Operation Torchlight. Senator Blaine's campaign was frozen. The CIA cut all public comment. And across the world, people were asking not just what happened, but how many other operations had been buried the same way. Back in his safe house, Johnny Depp looked out the window as the sun began to rise. He whispered to himself, "You wanted a show, Jimmy? Now the world's watching." And for the first time in years, he smiled not as an actor, but as a man who finally knew he'd done something real. The streets outside the Capitol were filled with angry voices. Protesters held banners that read, "Truth over power and no more ghost wars." Others held pictures of Adel Haddad, the Iraqi interpreter killed in the drone strike, with candles and flowers beneath them. The sound of shouting echoed across Washington, louder than any campaign speech. Inside the building, Senator Richard Blaine sat in a private security room surrounded by lawyers and aides. His face was pale, jaw locked tight. Across the screen in front of him, the BBC interview with Alina Nuri was being replayed. She had just finished presenting a document proving that Blaine had personally approved 3 unsanctioned airstrikes. In 2004, one of which had killed 17 civilians. "They don't have the clearance to publish this," Blaine muttered, but no one responded. Everyone in the room knew this wasn't about clearance anymore. This was about survival, an aide whispered. "The president is going to release a statement, distancing the administration from you." Blaine's eyes flared. "After everything I did for this country?" "Sir, the Pentagon just confirmed that Torchlight existed." Meanwhile, across the city, Jimmy Kimmel prepared for another special broadcast, his second in 3 days. The studio was under tight security. No audience, no ads. Just Jimmy, Alina, and a new surprise guest, former CIA analyst Mark Fenley, who had worked on Torchlight's internal reports. Mark sat nervously on stage, his hands trembling. "I saw it all," he said. "From the inside, we were told we were preventing terror. But what we did, what we covered up," he looked down, ashamed. "We killed people who had no weapons, no charges, just names. Sometimes not even that." Jimmy leaned forward. "Did Senator Blaine know?" Mark nodded. "He didn't just know. He ordered it." That clip went viral within minutes. One major headline read, "Blaine gave the kill order, says CIA insider." As chaos grew in the U.S., the international response was even stronger. The United Nations Human Rights Council passed an emergency resolution calling for an immediate investigation into Operation Torchlight. Dozens of countries supported it. France, Germany, Brazil, South Africa, even traditional allies of the U.S., like the UK, expressed concern. For the first time in U.S. history, a sitting senator was facing potential charges at the International Criminal Court. Blaine tried to fight back. He released a video claiming all evidence had been deep-faked by hostile foreign powers. He blamed Johnny Depp and Alina Nuri by name, calling them agents of chaos. But the public wasn't buying it anymore. Jimmy Kimmel, now a reluctant voice for justice, said during his show, "It's always easier to blame the messenger than to face the mirror. But the mirror's broken now, and the whole world is staring through the cracks." In hiding, Johnny Depp was receiving updates through secure channels. He listened to the clip of Mark Fenley's confession in silence. Then he sent one final message to Alina. "There's one more file. I never uploaded it. I was scared. You'll know what to do." Alina received the file the next morning. She opened it carefully in a soundproof room with her team. It was a video low resolution, grainy but clear enough. It showed a young Iraqi boy, no older than 10, sitting in a dark cell. His name, shown briefly in a logbook, was Sami Hadudel, Hadid's nephew. A soldier off-screen asked him a question. The boy didn't answer. A voice barked, "We need a message for the village. Make it loud." Then the screen went black. No gunshot, no scream. Just silence. The metadata showed the video was recorded 2 hours before a known U.S. airstrike destroyed a nearby mosque. Alina stared at the screen. She had seen many horrors in her career, but this broke something inside. She turned to her producer. "This goes live tonight at 9 p.m. Her report aired across global news networks under the title, "The Missing Witness: The Child America Erased." The report broke records. Over 100 million viewers across every continent. Hashtags flooded the internet. Hashtag justice for Sami. Hashtag Tribunal. Hashtag end secret wars in Washington. Senator Blaine's mansion was surrounded by protesters. He was no longer seen as a leader, but as a war criminal in a suit. The Department of Justice announced a formal inquiry. The CIA suspended Michael Vance indefinitely pending investigation, and the International Criminal Court sent an official request for Senator Richard Blaine to appear before a tribunal at The Hague. As the sun rose over the city, a chopper hovered above the Capitol. Journalists lined the streets. Agents escorted Blaine to a black vehicle. He wore sunglasses, but the cameras captured his expression: tired, angry, defeated, and far away. In a quiet cabin in Iceland, Johnny Depp finally turned off his laptop and poured himself a glass of wine. He had been running for years. Running from pain, from politics, from his past. But for the first time, he felt free. Not because he escaped, but because the truth didn't. The world was no longer just watching. It was demanding answers. As Senator Richard Blaine boarded the flight to The Hague, escorted by U.S. federal agents, journalists crowded every corner of the airport. Protesters shouted from behind barriers, holding signs that read "No justice, no peace, and Blaine must face the world." It was the first time in modern American history that a sitting senator was being turned over to an international court for alleged war crimes. Pressure had come from all sides, not only from the public, but from global allies and even retired military generals who had once stood by Blaine. The tide had shifted. No one could protect him now. In Washington, Jimmy Kimmel aired a quiet message before taking a break from the spotlight. "I never imagined I'd become part of a story like this," he said. "But if it took a late-night comedy show to open a door, then I'm glad we left it wide open." To those still fighting for the truth, don't stop. He signed off without applause. There was no need for it anymore. Meanwhile, Alina Nuri traveled to Geneva to speak at a special session of the United Nations Human Rights Council. Her reporting had changed the course of history. But she wasn't interested in praise. "I didn't uncover this story to be famous," she told the panel. "I uncovered it because a man named Adel Haddad gave me the courage. Because a child named Sami never had the chance to grow up. Because the truth was never meant to stay buried." Her voice was clear, calm, but heavy with emotion. She showed the council footage from the Torchlight files, blacked out names, timelines, orders. She read parts of letters written by the families of those killed. Letters never meant for the public, now heard by the world. When she finished, there was silence. Then, one by one, the delegates stood and applauded, across the world. People were rising too, in London. Students organized a march under the banner, "Power tells lies, but truth has witnesses." In Beirut, street artists painted murals of Sami Haddad, with the words, "He was just a boy." In Tokyo, a projection lit up the side of a skyscraper. Hashtag TORCHLIGHT, exposed but not. Everyone was celebrating. In a hidden facility outside Langley, former CIA Director Michael Vance was being questioned by a congressional oversight team. His expression was blank as investigators showed him documents with his signature, authorizing enhanced interrogations and secret drone clearances. "We did what we had to do," he said coldly. "The world isn't safe." That boy, that interpreter, those protesters, they weren't part of the equation. "We were protecting America." "No," a congresswoman replied. "You were protecting yourselves." A day later, Vance was indicted for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit war crimes, back in Iceland. Johnny Depp watched the world change from a wooden cabin surrounded by snow. He received letters, thousands of them, from families, veterans, students, even government workers who had never spoken out before. Some thanked him, others apologized, some just wrote one word: "Why?" One night, he finally answered. He posted a video to the platform where he first released the leak, no music. No edits, just him sitting by a fire. "I didn't do this because I'm brave," he said. "I did it because I was tired. Tired of knowing and doing nothing. Of watching powerful men use silence as a weapon. Of pretending this was someone else's fight." He paused, looked at the camera. "You don't need to be famous to tell the truth. You just need to stop being afraid of what it might cost. The real cost is when we say nothing." It became the most shared video in internet history 2 weeks later. The trial of Senator Richard Blaine began at The Hague. He stood in the courtroom in a dark suit, eyes hard, expression emotionless. But no matter how powerful he once was, no matter how many secrets he once controlled, the evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses testified. CIA documents were read aloud. Whistleblowers confirmed every order, every lie, every death. And in the final moments, a clip played Johnny Depp on Jimmy Kimmel Live, shouting, "The world deserves the truth." The courtroom was silent. Then the judge spoke. This tribunal finds Senator Richard Blaine guilty of crimes against humanity under the principles of international law. The world exhaled. Outside the court, reporters cried, hugged, and sent out headlines that echoed across every nation. Justice delivered at last. Torchlight ends in conviction. Truth wins. And somewhere far from the noise and applause, Johnny Depp stepped outside his cabin, looked up at the cold, wide sky, and whispered something only the wind could hear. "Now they can rest." Snow fell gently outside Johnny Depp's remote cabin in Iceland. The world was healing slowly, painfully, but visibly. For Johnny, the silence after the storm was both a relief and a burden. The truth was out. Blaine had fallen. But with each quiet morning, he wondered, what comes next when the truth is no longer a secret? Alina Nuri had returned to New York. Her face, once unknown to many, had become a global symbol of courage. She had received nominations for every journalism award imaginable, but she turned down most interviews. Instead, she used her new influence to build a small international media foundation called Witness Echo, aimed at helping whistleblowers safely tell their stories. In an old warehouse-turned-newsroom, she sat with her team, reviewing files from news sources. One email caught her eye. Subject: Torchlight wasn't the only one. Attached were redacted reports, new names, new places, new victims. Alina sighed. It never ends. She sent a secure message to Jimmy Kimmel. He now hosted a rebranded independent show called The Reckoning, airing weekly on a major global platform. It featured survivors, journalists, whistleblowers, and even former intelligence officers. The first episode, after Blaine's trial, had reached 72 million viewers. Jimmy responded to Alina within minutes. "Let's meet. There's still more to say." Meanwhile, Senator Richard Blaine sat in an isolated prison unit in The Hague. The man once considered untouchable now wore a gray jumpsuit. No camera crews followed him. No more speeches. His days were filled with silence and his own thoughts. One morning, he received a letter from a woman in Baghdad. "You said we were collateral damage. My son was not an enemy. He liked drawing birds. He was 7 years old." There was no return address. Blaine folded the paper carefully and put it under his pillow. It was the only letter he had received in Washington. The fallout continued. A congressional committee launched a full review of past covert operations. Dozens of defense contracts were frozen. Multiple intelligence officials quietly resigned. A new transparency law was passed with overwhelming support. It was called the Sami Act, named after the young boy in the leaked footage, Sami Haddad. The law required all military and intelligence operations to be reviewed by an independent international council before deployment. For the first time, accountability had a framework. Johnny followed all of this from afar. He had been offered interviews, book deals, documentaries. He turned them all down. He had only one request: that the final testimony be given not by him, Not by Alina, but by someone whose voice had never been heard. Adele Hadid's wife. Nadia was flown to Geneva to speak before the United Nations. Nervous but determined. She stood at the podium in front of world leaders. "My husband only wanted the truth to matter," she said. "He didn't care about revenge. He cared that people would remember, that no child would be forgotten. No war would erase a name like Sammy's." When she finished, the room gave her a standing ovation. Back in Iceland, Johnny sat alone under the stars, a glass of wine in one hand, the fire crackling beside him. He had grown thinner, older, quieter, but something inside him had returned something. He thought fame had buried years ago. He picked up a pen and wrote a letter. It was addressed to Alina. "I'm done hiding. Not because I'm fearless, but because I know now truth is bigger than fear. Thank you for standing when I couldn't." He folded the note, placed it in an envelope, and left it with a traveler. Heading back to New York, the next morning, Johnny walked to the edge of a frozen lake and stood still. Not as an actor, not as a hero, just as a man. The sky above him stretched wide and gray, full of peace, and in the silence, for the first time. In a long time he felt free, not because the world had changed, but because he had. The truth had not saved him.